Matt Bartolomeo. This is my 1992 Toyota MR2 SW21. Up, I read a lot of the, Motor Trend, Car and Driver, Road and Track. I mean, these are the magazines I had around all the time. And when the MR2, the second gen first came out, this was kind of when, the styling was really changing as you got from, more of the boxy styling, which I still love, of the 80s, as you're kind of moving to the 90s. And the MR2, the second gen, was just so different from the first gen. I mean, they're so different from looks. And, as a teenager, and I saw this car come out, and I was just like, wow, that is a cool car. One day, I'm going to own the second gen MR2. Fast forward 20 years, married, have a kid. He's starting to become a teenager, and we get in the cars. What does he like? JDM. And it's kind of rekindled my interest in it because I had, starting off so young, my wife and I were teenage parents. So when you start off that young, you don't have any money to do anything, you kind of lose a little bit of your, passions, some of the interests that you used to be into. And so we had just bought, always just had commuter cars. We were actually going to get like the Lexus 200H or whatever it was. And we went test drove it, it was okay. But I told my wife, I said, well, if we don't get the test drive a BMW, we'll always regret it. And so we went test drive the BMW. It was just a 328i, but we loved it. We had never had something, it was like our first sports car that we've ever owned, like a true sports car. And from that was when my son was, I don't think he was quite a teenager yet, but that really got his interest in the cars, and he immediately gravitated over to Japanese styling and the JDM and the old stuff. It rekindled my spirit, and then as years started going by, I became more successful at my job, and I got to the point where I could kind of take on a car for fun. It wasn't something that I didn't know what I wanted to do with it, but I knew I could finally own an MR2 that I wanted. So growing up, I always thought, well, it's the turbo, so I got to get the turbo. But at the time I was looking for cars, turbos were, they're really expensive. Even though those cars are, 20-something years old. I mean, even the US models, to find a clean turbo car, it easily be 10 grand or more. And so I was able to find this NA for $3,800. And when I got it, it didn't have any exhaust on it. It was just a down pipe, and that was it. It had 19-inch wheels on it, like 10J in the front, 9J in the front. The tires were completely bald on it. The guys had used, a cutting tool and spun the wheels and grooved their own tread into the freaking tires. The interior of the car, even for a car that 190,000 miles, was in really good shape. Just the driver's side seat had a tear in it. And so it was a really good starting point. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with the MR2 when I first bought it, but I knew I wanted it. And so for the first year, really all I did was kind of take the MR2 back to stock. So got all the missing trim, anything in the inside that was missing, like, ashtrays or an actual shift boot or a shifter, the steering wheel. I just basically brought it back to OEM. So naturally, I was just all into it too. I was just digging it, and I was just loving it. And so that's when I knew, when I started to build out this MR2, I wanted to stick with that, that older, that 90s styling. So the MR2, I never really wanted to make it like a show car, but I wanted to kind of bring it back to what it could have been like in the 90s. So old school seats, old school wheels. I don't try to put anything on it that's going to accelerate its years or make it look like it's older. The car I had, it was a naturally aspirated one, so it was the 5S engine. And I decided, last year that I wanted to swap it. And so I thought I was going to do a turbo swap for the longest time. Thought I was going to do a 3rd or 4th gen, rear clip and do a swap that way. But then I found out about the Beams engine. And so the Beams engine, specifically the one that I have, is the 4th gen red top 3SGE that only came in Japan, where the MR2 was in Japan, the UK, the US. Only the Japanese market in 89 or 98 and 99 got the Beams engine. It was also in the Celica. It was also in the RAV4. And so when I knew the MR2 came with this engine, and then I also found out that there was only, forget if it's either 1,000 or 1,500 MR2s that ever had the Beams engine. So a lot of the people in the MR2 community who do the beam swap generally get it from the Celica and they just piece everything together. I was able to find a swap that not only was it the Beams engine, but it was from an MR2. It came with the MR2 transmission, it came with the LSD, it came with the subframe, the rotors, axles, the whole nine. And so I just couldn't pass on it because I really wanted to stay naturally aspirated. I don't necessarily take it tracking, but I do like to go to autocross with it, and just having that NA is a little better for autocrossing than having the turbo. And so I really wanted to stay NA, knew about the beams, the prestige with it, and just also on top of all of this is also my first swap of any kind whatsoever. Again, this is like my first car that I've really kind of built up. I've never had, a project car. The other reason why I stuck with the NA, because I figured, well, since this is my first swap, this is also for the MR2. It's already for a naturally aspirated car. There's not a lot of things I have to do to kind of convert it. The wiring harness only needed a little bit of work done. I was able to get that through Doug over at a Wire Gap. He does good work. He does a lot of stuff for the MR2 community. In the 5S motor, which was a 2.2, it made, in 92 it made 130 horsepower. So a car that weighs somewhere around 2,800 pounds. It wasn't very peppy, but the MR2 is so fun to drive. It is just the mid-engine sports car is so much fun to drive, even with having a slower engine. It was incredible because you can just ride out those gears so much longer. I'd gotten when I had the 5S, I had done like a aftermarket intake, aftermarket header. I had a custom exhaust built for it. When I say custom, I don't mean expensive. I just mean custom as far as like we just took an OEM style muffler and added a whole bunch of tubing onto it, and kind of gave it a dual exhaust, a functional dual exhaust with a flange built into the tube and everything. And when that all came together, the notes it made were just incredible. The intake sounds were so good, the exhaust note was so good. So when you say so good, what are you comparing it to, Matt? Well, I have to compare it to the 4AG because it's just like the greatest engine sounds. And so the 5S sounded so much like the 4AG. So while it was slow, oh my God, it was so much fun to drive. So the 3S, coming new from the factory, you get VVTi, which comes in after 6,000, but you've got 197 horsepower. So it's a totally different car now. I'm not used to, with the 5S, once you hit 90 miles per hour, you're pretty much done. You could go to 4th, you could go to 5th, it was just done. A lot of people in the community that would dyno their old 5Ss, would generally come back still only making like, 90 horsepower. The 5S just doesn't make a lot of power over time. But the Beams engine is just, it's a totally different beast. The sounds are totally different to it. So even though the car was faster, initially, I'm not a big fan of change as far as like, I liked everywhere I'd gotten to with the 5S. It sounded so good, it felt so good to drive, and I was actually afraid to do the beam swap because I didn't want to give up such a perfect combination of things that I put together. And so when I did the 3S, the first thing I noticed was just, how different it sounded. I mean, sure, it was quick. It's a lot quicker. I mean, adding, 60 something horsepower at least on top of it, a newer engine, because we had it out, we're able to, refresh it and gaskets and, take care of, things you would do when you get the new engine. But it didn't sound the same. And so that part of it changed, and it took me a little bit of time to actually learn to appreciate the 3S motor for what it is. But I now have grown to love it.